Malak Kalmoni Chehab is a Canadian and survivor of two civil war, Ghana, Lebanon. She lived on three continents with a great variety of cultures, religions, and races. These all left an impact on her and are expressed in her writing to voice her feelings, frustrations, and rebellion against ingrained stereotype and degradation of the human condition. She has published Perfectly Flawed Poetry for Change, which was on the finalist list for the Canadian Book Club Award 2023. A poem in Unseal Your Greatness, another in Unseal Your Worth, or Woman in ArLiJo EU 187, Avid Reader for Canadian Book Club Awards and Canadian authors. And on today's episode of Author Interview, it's my utmost pleasure and joy to have on the show today, Malak Kalmoni. How are you doing, Malak?
Well, thank you very much. How are you doing?
Absolutely, and I'm quite excited really to have you on the show
Mhm,
today. Quite awesome. We're gonna be having a
mhm.
conversation around your beautiful title.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah. Uh,
okay.
y- Absolutely. I want to first start with, of course, your book, Perfectly Flawed, which I love the background displayed in your Zoom there, and the beautiful
Thank you.
cover you just showed us too. And I'd like to
Yeah.
ask you, how does this book come
Mhm.
about? What inspired you to write Perfectly Flawed?
Well, honestly, I started writing quite a while back, so in around 2000s. But at the time, nothing came of it because I was a teacher and I was raising my kids at the time. So I would just write and forget about it. And then I had a health issue in 2016, and I couldn't teach any longer. So my kids brought me a copybook, and they said, "Mom, we know you can write.
Oh,
Just write stories or write whatever you feel like writing."
yeah.
And writing started like my blog and my actual writing started from there. So it's been a journey, and it's been very interesting and eventful, and how should I say this? Um, Difficult to overcome some difficulties, especially with COVID, because my book came out
Hmm.
in COVID.
Oh,
Um, yeah, yeah, and because it came out in Canada. During COVID, there were no book signings. There were no all of these gatherings were not permitted
of
during
course.
those times. So it didn't get it
Section.
didn't get, yes, yes, the traction that I would have liked.
Wow, that's quite amazing to know, actually. I'm quite excited to know
Mhm,
about how the book came to be. And I particularly love the title name. And I'm curious to
mhm.
ask you, how did you form or how did you get the idea to name it Perfectly Flawed?
Someone once asked me, is the book perfectly flawed about body image? Because that was their first reaction, and I said it has absolutely nothing to do with body image. It
Oh,
has to do with the the idea of perfection that humanity tries to achieve, but we know we're flawed. So it's basically humanity that is perfectly flawed.
oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah,
Humanity that is perfectly flawed. That sounds like a
exactly.
very deep one there.
Yeah,
It's very deep. Thank you.
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love the sound of that. And now, for readers who haven't read the book yet, and without
Hmm.
giving much information away, could we have a
Hmm.
sneak of what we'd expect in terms of themes picking up the book?
Sure. The book itself is divided into three chapters, and the chapters are themselves. I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so the first chapter is basically relationships, and
Oh,
the second chapter is social criticism, post-colonial politics, and religion.
Wow.
And it's basically criticism of all three. The last section is basically self reflection and awareness and growth. So
Oh,
I was hoping to kind of choose one poem per theme to sort of share so that it would give the readers an idea of the content and the way that I write.
yeah.
Um, so I don't know if that would be acceptable for you.
Absolutely. That's fine.
Okay. Well, in chapter one,
Yeah.
there are actually two poems that I would really like to share. One is titled Masculinity, but written uh, in capital mask, the word mask, and ulinity as in so masculinity instead of the C, the K.
Oh, oh.
So this poem, I'll just read it for you because it got quite a reaction from several people, and it was written for my husband and my son. Masculinity.
Mm,
Where's the man's role in society today? He was the main breadwinner yesterday. He was king of his domain. He was the unrefuted leader back in the heyday. What's his role today? Is he still the one and only maker of money? The
mm,
sole ruler and leader of his family? Is he still required to be gentlemanly? What does his partner need of him daily? Is it just words of love solely? Is it just a bed partner and helper dearly? Or is it a strength of character sturdily, holding you up when it is or isn't necessarily, knowing that his strength encompasses you securely? The safety of his embrace carefully engulfs you entirely. Obstacles are faced together verily. None are left to smolder and inflamingly surround you with their blistering, heatedly the burn sizzles out frizzily
wow.
when faced with the power of unity.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
That's very amazing. And I enjoy listening to you recite this.
thank you. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see. Oh, wait a minute. Let me see if
Oh,
you can see this.
The Zoom background is taking it quite away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
think I
if
can
you
see
can
now.
see the small drawings that are at the bottom, those are
The
hand drawn
star.
by myself as well. So
Oh.
for masculinity, I don't know if you can see it properly.
Yeah. For for
Uh,
for that, I think there's a way you can position it. You just have to turn it a bit downward this way.
Oh, there we
I
go.
think it's coming out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
don't know if
coming
you
up
can.
and going off at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
Anyway, but
this
the
way.
drawings are basically just simple symbols of the theme of the poem itself. Sometimes I do that. Um, the other poem that really got a lot of attention was in this particular section was Monster. Now, let me read it and then you tell me what you think. So, Monster, I
Yeah.
look upon it and fear. Fear its inky beauty of raven curly hair, twisting, twisting vilely against smooth greenish skin, lips contorted into a sadistic twist, belying its humanity. That's ingrained in its fear, jealousy, envy, insidious, bitterness, and greedy, avarice for what one doesn't have, needy. Really, that hidden monster lies sleepily, burrows, scratches, and punches freely when it scents a burgeoning lovely that is beyond its reach. Stealthily, it winds around it, choking it with doubt, disrespect, malicious fears that live in drought, but spring to life when the monster fought for superiority as goodness laughed, happiness, sheer, joyful, good humor, waging the battle for superiority. For
Wow.
the slithering foxy monstrosity, be strong, put him in a corner, feed him love and soothe its temper. Let your warmth and adulation assuage his humor, feel your power, overcome evil's ruler.
Wow, that's quite amazing. I love the depth of your poetry. I
Thank
love the
you. Thank you.
depth and profundity, how
Thank
profound,
you.
how weighty, and how deep they are. Yeah.
Thank,
It's quite lovely to me, and I know I never wanted it to stop. Thank you for reciting.
thank you. Thank you. You're so kind.
Yeah, I love the
Um,
sound of it actually.
yeah, I'm glad. I'm
Yeah,
really glad. Yeah.
absolutely. And you know,
Yeah.
taking on from your carrying on from your lovely recitation, I'm curious to ask you what your
Hmm.
definition of poetry is. You know, to different
Um,
poets, they have different ways of defining poetry, what poetry means to them. I'd love to ask you, in your own words and terms, how would you define poetry? What does poetry means to you?
to me, it's a rebellion. It's rebelling against the status quo, rebelling against injustice, rebelling
Wow,
against a society
wow,
um, that promotes inequality. Um, it's a rebellion against inhumanity, and honestly, since I started writing again, so many issues have come up and been a part of my writing. One of them being George Floyd, if you've heard of him, during COVID in the U.S. George Floyd, a black man, was killed by the police. Um, because they were protesting against the inequality and the problems that were taking place during COVID. So one of the poems called "Lives Matter"
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
was written in response to that, because
yeah,
uh, after that the Black Lives Matter movement came about, right?
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah, for me, it's not only just one race that matters. It's all races, all of humanity. And my poem
absolutely.
Lives Matter kind of summarizes that. So when I say poetry is a rebellion, it's a definition of um, perhaps what the ideal that we want society to be.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. You see, this is one thing. This is one of the beauty of being a writer and a poet. And from
Thank
your
you.
answer to this question, I got to
Mhm.
think, or I got to realize that we poets tends to define poetry based on our experience, based on our writing, based on the
Mhm.
things that we write about, the themes that we explore specifically in our works. You know, for you, you feel like poetry is rebellion against humanity, which is very wholesome. I mean, rebellion against discrimination, against inhumanity, against
Mhm.
racism, against quite a lot of things we've seen in our environment, in our community today that are quite dehumanizing and that. So it's amazing that you're writing in this amazing thing. You could define poetry that, oh yeah, poetry to me is rebellion against things that are not good. It's a fight for justice, it's a fight for the truth. Whereas someone who has written poem out of grief would define poetry as a mean of release, as a mean of therapy, as a mean of something to comfort them in time of grief, as a mean of so it varies based on the kind of themes that I just come to discover
don't
this
don't get
actually.
don't get me wrong, I do write poetry sometimes for stress relief and for
Mm,
emotional reactions that
yeah, yeah.
I do not want to show to the world, not because I am not comfortable with my emotions, no, because I know that my emotions might hurt someone else, and I don't like that. So I bottle up my emotions and I write them out. Yes, then
Absolutely.
it would be therapeutic for me.
Yeah.
Monster, the poem that I read, is one of those because for me, um, I went through quite a few things as when I was teaching that showed me that a person that I was raised with as a child turned out to be someone who was extremely jealous. So it, I had to write it out in order for me to get the idea across. However, no names are given, no stories are given. It's just put in a context that is generalized, that makes you understand that this is pure therapy for me.
Amazing. I still actually love your divination in there. It's quite beautiful. I mean, you consider it rebellion against humanity. And as for me, I've always loved to define poetry as the language of the soul of the writer, the language of the soul
Absolutely.
of the poet, because I
Yes.
think that these are things that come from within, from our heart, from our
Yes.
deepest trust expression. And I love to
Hmm.
consider whenever I get to ask Peter, what is poetry? I was like, poetry to me is a language of the soul of the poet at that time that a particular poem was written. And the fact
Um,
that the language can communicate different themes on different circumstances at different time. In some time, it might
mhm.
communicate at brokenness in times of, you know, love issues. Sometimes it can communicate pain. Sometimes it can communicate relief. Sometimes it can
Yeah.
communicate happiness in times of,
Yes.
excitement. So I always love it that way, being the language of the soul of the poet. Amazing definition you've got. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I really
Thank you.
enjoyed this.
Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'd
Yeah.
also like to ask you, Malak, apart from
Sure.
Perfectly Flawed, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently
Um,
working on?
I've got several poems published in a variety of anthologies. One of them is uh, titled can't remember the title, but the anthology is called Unseal Your Greatness. And I have another one in another anthology titled Unseal Your Worth. I've got several that were published in different magazines, um, quite a few published on several websites. I don't know if you've heard of Alien Buddha Press. Look it up, Alien Buddha Press. I have quite a few poems there um, promoting, well, not promoting, but talking about war and Palestinians, that the effects of war on them and how what they're experiencing, So yeah, I've actually haven't gotten any hooks yet.
Oh, that's amazing. It's quite fun to know that you've got quite a few poems published on Literary Magazine and you're working on another one. And I hope you find some
Yeah,
times to sleep.
no, I do. Thank you, because it's not easy. Trust me.
So that we do. Thank you.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
funny.
because there was someone who wrote something on one of the poetry uh, sites on Facebook, poetry groups, and I was just telling him that be careful when you post something not to make grammatical mistakes because it shows negatively on your writing, or it sort of reduces your writing, the message you want to give across, it reduces your authority. And he goes, well, I wrote this in 20 minutes. And I go, yes, edit before. I know it seems kind of uh, nasty of me to point out, but a lot of poets have this tendency to make the mistake of, it's and it is are two different words, and they represent two different things. And
Absolutely.
people don't notice when they're writing because you have autocorrect.
Well, I love your
I
answer. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love your answers to this question, actually. Yeah,
uh-huh.
they do make for an interesting discussion and quite educative as well. Yeah. So I love to say thank you
Yeah.
for your amazing answers to these
You're welcome.
questions. Yeah,
You're
yeah,
welcome.
yeah. Now, could you tell
Yeah.
us what publishing is like for a published poet like yourself? Are there any challenges you've encountered in the process of writing your book and also ever since it got published? And also, how do you undo criticism as a writer?
The challenges, let's take them one at a time. The challenges was uh honestly, because it was published during COVID and it didn't get the publicity that any kind of book requires,
Yeah.
um, it kind of got stagnated. Um,
Oh,
Even when I did get I was on the finalist list for the book club awards,
yeah.
it sort of gave it a little bit of a push. But you know as well as I do that marketing needs to be done, and it's very expensive. And
Yeah.
as a as a person who self-published my book,
Yeah.
I didn't have the resources to continue with the marketing,
Shit.
so that stopped me there. So I went back on track by being on a lot of poetry groups
Oops.
online on social media,
Yeah.
and magazines, literary magazines. So I do a lot of applications on Submittable and Duadena, all of those. Um, on a yearly basis, I think I do a submission of maybe 20 to 25 submissions. Maybe one goes through and gets accepted. And I keep telling them rejection is um, depends on your perception of what it is. For me, rejection is a renewal. It's telling me do better.
Wow. 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 This is quite amazing, really. This is
Thank
I
you.
love your take on this and how the whole thing goes through the challenges also and the process of publishing and also how you undo criticism. Sounds quite fun to me. Thanks for
Thank
mentioning.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And is there anything that you'd love to share with the viewers about your poetry book that we did not mention in this interview and you'd love the viewers to know specifically?
Uh, one of my favorite poems is actually the last one, called Heaven's Gate.
Heaven's Gate.
Heaven's Gate. Now, I'm not going to read it. It would take a bit of time. But the idea is, I knock on the door of Heaven's Gate, and the door stays closed to me. I'm not permitted to enter. And I ask why. The answer is, you haven't done enough to enter. So what do you do? What do you do? Do you use that as a way to stay as you are, or do you take that as an impetus to change?
That's quite
And
amazing. That sounds
Yeah.
That sounds correctional.
Yes, yes.
That sounds
It's like
correctional, like you should observe yourself again and do the right thing, you know?
exactly, exactly, precisely.
It sounds a bit ethical, tempting to promote morals and values.
Yes, less violence.
That's amazing. I love
Yeah.
the sound of Heaven's
Thank
Gate.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Now, as a
Yeah.
published author too, what sort of advice do you have for other poets who are still struggling with publishing a book, publishing a collection?
Um,
What would you advise
my
people in this
first,
category?
yeah, my first piece of advice is very simple. Do the heavy lifting, do the work. So be a part of a poetry community, any writing community, whether it is local, whether it's online. Participate, get your name heard, so that people would recognize it. So when you do have a book and you send it out, then oh, this person, well, I've heard of that person. I've read some of their work. I'd be interested in buying the book. You see the connection.
Yeah,
A lot of people think that okay, if I just write the book and I can sell it, that's not true. There are millions of books that are being published and self-published,
yeah,
and there's a lot of problems with the self-publishing domain, including the
absolutely.
fact that there's a lot of mistakes that come out, grammatical or spelling or whatnot, that
Wow.
they overlook. It's not done on purpose, but it's overlooked. So again, do the work and then go for publishing, because then you will have a return on your input, on the input that you've put into the book.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's an amazing advice you've got. I'm hoping that
Hmm.
viewers, including myself, would love to utilize it. Yeah, yeah, including
I hope
myself.
so too. I hope so too. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you would like to
Yeah.
read or recite a couple more poems to the audience. I know you've read a bit in the beginning. I don't know if you have
I
one more you'd love to do. That will be
Yes,
fine.
I'd like to read Life. I
Great
don't know if
job.
you can
Let's do
see it.
it. I can
Hold
see
on.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. So the you notice that there's a lifeline at the bottom, right? It's titled Life in Parentheses. It's actually life and parentheses around it. So, what is the span of a life but an important parentheses? How long is a human life's length? Do we measure it in solar years or its deaths? Insects, for example, can live for a few weeks to years. Mammals can range from decades to a century. People can survive up to 80 decades. The question is, what do they accomplish? Is it worthwhile, memorable, historic? Is it even worth a mention in a parenthesis? How long does the memory last? A day, a dozen days, weeks, months, decades? Although each of us is special in our own ways, our uniqueness starts with a sperm winning the races. Then, any notable characteristics and abilities are just icing on the cakes. Those are what will fill your life in parentheses.
Wow. Wow. This you have a style. You have a style with words. You have a style with your placement. You have a style with the way you put your words together in a way that it made for an interesting, deep recitation and a profound meaning. And it's one that I think you have to read, pause, think,
Mhm.
reflect, digest what you've just
Ah,
read before you move to the
yeah,
next line. Thank you for an amazing recitation.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. I
Yeah,
really do love it. And I'm very, very sincere
thanks.
about this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And just in case we
Yeah.
have some viewers who are currently watching this interview, I would love to get a copy of Perfectly Flawed. On what platform is it available on for
It's
purchase?
available on all e-platforms, including Amazon. The I don't know if I sent you the link for the book,
Yeah,
the Amazon link. So if you have that, you can just sort of add it into the interview.
yeah,
That way, they'll have easy access to it. Like I have my
interesting.
own Google version of it. Um, it's on iTunes, no, Barnes and Noble, Kindle, all of them.
Yeah. And I left a link in the discussion part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Malak Kalmoni's books directly on Amazon and also another platform. I also left a link to our social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Malak, for accepting the invitation
Thank
to be
you.
featured on P English Literature. It's really wholesome, and I must say it's so wholesome having this conversation with you. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Thank you. So did I. So did I.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure as well.